Petersen, the creator of Mouseguard, and this is creator commentary for Mouseguard issue 5, Midnight's Dawn, which was later collected in the hardcover Fall 1152. For this issue and the remaining issues in Fall 1152, I'll be doing the commentary as audio only, but please feel free to follow along in your copy of the story either in issue form or from the hardcover, as I talk about behind-the-scenes details, art notes, and my headspace as I go page by page and panel by panel. I was writing and drawing this issue in July of 2006 for Archaea. As it's the penultimate issue in the arc, I wanted it to be the darkest before the dawn issue. I'd imagined right after issue 1 came out that it would be cool to do an issue set in the rain. I decided to couple the rain with the villain issue. Cover. The color palette for this issue is set here in this cover, though truth be told, I'd established it a bit at the end of the last issue. Like most of my wraparound covers, the main subject of the issue is on the front, while the back side is where something more is revealed. On issue 4's cover, Kellanagh was on the front, and Saxon and Kenzie trussed up were on the back. Here, Midnight stands boldly with his usurped black axe, and on the back, Liam is a marching prisoner. I still like the graphic nature of the shape of the army behind the figures, but I wish I'd done a better job of fading out the bottoms of the soldiers that we can see. I was still learning how to color my own work then. I think this could benefit from some touch-up work to push the planes of depth. Inside front cover. The title of the issue is a play on words, Midnight's name being an almost antithesis time of day as dawn. And with a title like that, it's hard not to reveal the secret from the last issue. More on that in a few pages. The Star Wars-like opening crawl doesn't provide any new information, but sums up the previous issue, while also helping to cement some ideas about the nature of the title, The Black Axe. The little excerpt at the bottom of the page is some more world-building work. The guard need to be able to read the subtle signs of nature to predict weather, something I'd borrowed from an old Boy Scout handbook, which is why the attribution explains that this is from a field guide distributed to all guard mice. The illustration of Midnight reading foreshadows a later part of the issue. The book Midnight is reading from says Lockhaven, but if I could, I'd make the cover more like M's book from the Black Axe hardcover, because that is what he's holding here. It's very hard to see, but on one of the spines of the books he's sitting on are the initials CPG, for Cursed Pirate Girl, a book by my pal Jeremy Bastian. The lowest book in the pile has the Archaea logo, and the title looks to be Artesia, the book Archaea founder Mark Smiley was working on at the time. Page 1, Panel 1. For this nature panel framing the title, there is little ink on the actual page. However, the rain overlay sheet was very busy with lines. To achieve the rain in this issue, I'd lay a sheet of drawing paper over the page and on a light box. Then, I'd draw in all the rain lines and drips. This way, I could see anything on the art I needed to have the rain splattering, trickling off of, or to avoid for clarity, like a mouse's eye. By having the rain inks isolated on another sheet, I could easily make them lighter and semi-transparent when coloring the page. Panels 2 through 4. The rhyme here is based on a real rhyme for predicting precipitation. I just replaced the real-world sailors with Mouseguard's guard mice. Page 2, Panel 1. In this panel, Midnight's revealed by name, if the title of the issue hadn't cued readers off already. When this issue came out, I saw reviews and comments online where fans were confused and wondered if they had missed something where the reveal had already been explained. Unfortunately, I took the cliffhanger of Liam seeing Midnight's face and saying, "You," to now it's just casually said as narration that Midnight is the traitor. I do wish I'd handled the reveal a little better, and looking back at my outline for the issue, my only reference to this subject is, quote, "Midnight's identity is revealed," end quote. Panels 2 through 4. Liam continues his narration as he's lashed to a beam to keep his hands apart and useless. This is meant to be a parallel to how Saxon and Kenzie started the previous issue. They were bound and captured by Kellanagh, an owner of the Black Axe, and now Liam is getting his turn at the same type of abuse from a different axe wielder. Each of these panels is at a different focus size, starting tighter with panel 2 on Liam until eventually, by the last panel, we're getting more of a landscape image with dots for the mouse army. In the time I was writing Fall, I know I didn't do too much dialogue work ahead of time. I would write it as I was lettering the page. But rereading this and the upcoming pages, I'm sure I must have had some typed draft of the dialogue because the text syncs too specifically with the imagery and beats for me to have essentially written the words after the art was done. Page 3. This page is a mirror of the previous page's layout. In panels 1 through 3, like on the previous page, the zoom or focus levels go from close on Midnight out to showing him much smaller by panel 3. The outline for this issue has this set of panels as, quote, Midnight explains the how, end quote. He was planning to just walk into the front gates of Lockhaven as a guard mouse, as he would always do, but then sabotage the gates so that they could not be closed and allow his army inside. Panel 4, the next part of the outline is, quote, Midnight explains the why, end quote, which Liam is kind enough to segue us into. Art note, the open ground space that is formed by the crowd apparently parting to make room for Liam's shout is a bit of the same shape, though bigger, that Midnight takes up in the previous page's corresponding panel, driving home further that idea of mirrored page layouts. Page 4, Panel 1. While Midnight is the one talking here, I knew I needed a reaction shot of Liam getting roughly pulled closer to Midnight. A choice I made not just for story, but also because it's easier then to have both characters I need to focus on in the same panels coming up. Panels 2 through 4. I'm glad I gave myself a moment for this pause and slow dawning realization that Midnight's cause has legitimate followers who believe the Guard is useless, and that they're willing to stand in the rain to proclaim it. It took 3 panels, which is a lot of valuable page real estate, but it ultimately gave an impact that I think more than justified it. A lot of acting when I draw these mice is done through body language and eyes. Liam here in panel 2 is an example of how, with no other facial features, I can convey surprise and dismay with just his eyes and body position. Page 5. This page is almost a mirror of the previous, but the second panel is one large panel instead of 2 smaller ones like the previous. Panel 1. Liam is being dragged along here. Either he can't stay up on the rainy ground while also being tied to that beam, or the soldiers want to humiliate him further while getting him to match pace with Midnight and the monologue. Either way, it spells suffering for Liam and victory for our villain. Panel 2. I think I referenced the same photo I used as the reference from page 1 of issue 1 that I took on our first wedding anniversary trip up near Traverse City, Michigan. It's the one of the grain merchant traversing a hill with some rocks. And Midnight here is putting forward some ideas about the same kind of balances of power that the founding fathers of the United States had over states' rights versus federal rights. Midnight believes that the Guard not having a centralized authority makes them an ineffective and exploited group, but I'd be careful to read too many other parallels into our real-world political situation or governmental policy. And Midnight is the villain. Not necessarily because of this belief, but because of what he feels are justified means, what acts of betrayal and blood he sees as justified costs to attaining his goal, which is ultimately to concentrate power into one sole mouse, himself. He is a dictator and a tyrant. Panel 3. What I mentioned about humiliation in panel 1, well, as the writer, I wanted to really put Liam through it. I wanted him to sink into the muck of this situation, not only where he is, but what's happening, and his lack of ability to fix it as Midnight arrives at his solution, something I've already mentioned. One sole leader. A dictatorship. Page 6. The rain is flooding this area. This is not meant to be an established waterway in the territories. The soldiers are first having to wade waist and neck deep, and then in panels 2 and 3 resort to improvised pine cone rafts to traverse the puddle. I had already shown Sadie with a leaf boat, and as I went through in commentary number 2, I see that leaf boat as having to be carefully crafted and prepared, perhaps waxed or sealed. So having Midnight's army use something that's just found on the ground and not really crafted or cared for, but just used in the spur of the moment seemed more fitting for their cause. With the dialogue here, as dictators tend to do, Midnight first makes some reasonable promises. Prosperity, security, standing up to foes, becoming something greater than what was there before. And Liam's torture is increased. He's gasping for breath, not just because of the water, but because of this plan and betrayal of Midnight's. Page 7. The panel layout is a rotation of the previous pages. Here, Midnight's oration goes into the grandiose, the ramblings of tyrants, over-promising, something he believes not only can be accomplished, but what he believes only he can deliver. I hear every balloon section of this page becoming increasingly louder and rage-filled as it goes on. I remember an interview with Mike Mignola talking about overwriting for the villains, keeping Shakespearean diatribes in mind. I'm giving Midnight that moment here, not just to explain to the reader or to make him sound a bit mad, but to give him that sense of a villain that is well aware of what he's doing, that he feels justified in it, and that he's going to do it no matter what anyone else says or does. And it's the kind of speech that hopefully both the hero and the reader are in their head just saying, "Shut up," about. And as the extreme symbol of what this means, I have drawn Liam in panel 2, practically drowning on this speech. Page 8, panel 1. Because this is the last we see of Liam in Midnight for a while, I needed to show Liam as upright, worse for wear, but alive and still marching. Midnight starts with the explanation of how he came to find the axe. Panels 2 through 3, and how when it was only a legend, he came to figure out that it truly existed, enough to seek it out. These flashback panels are technically the first images inside of Lockhaven in the series. This passage was, at the time, only meant to be a repository for the old manuscript evidence Midnight needed. Mouseguard readers know that this passage plays an important role later in Fall, as well as in Winter and the Black Axe, but I didn't have it in mind until I built it for these panels, and then used its existence to write in more story and more importance later. Page 9. To transition into what Midnight found, I wanted to show instead of tell. The next 4 pages are heavily influenced on Illuminated manuscript, but specifically the Book of Kells, a 9th century illustrated edition of the Gospels from the Bible. I wanted the lore of the Black Axe to feel real, to almost feel religious. From a world-building point of view, I think you can say a lot about a culture for how they record their history, in what form, and how celebrated or crafted the means of recording is. To get the look for these pages, I did a lot of Google searches for various clip art pieces of Celtic knotwork and patterns to digitally piece together with some font work when laying out these pages. As part of the fantasy lore of this tale, I had the Black Axe severing the necks of the 5 snakes who surrounded all that is, which sounds like some mythic point in time when Mousekind was either captive or believed the world to be captive of a quintet of snakes. Page 10. The origin of the weapons forging may have been something I didn't think about the specifics of until it was time to write this page. The blacksmith, who plays a much more important mythical role in the Black Axe book, is named Ferrer, which is a word relating to ferrous metal or iron. While the type was all laid out with a font first, the text on all these pages was hand-inked. That way I could manually distress each letter to make the Illuminated manuscript idea more believable. Page 11. Lockhaven's role in the Axe lore is revealed, as well as the weight, emotional and responsibility-wise, that the Axe holds. Lockhaven in abstract doesn't quite look like the version I'd draw at the end of the issue, but it's getting closer than where I started with that horrible floor plan map from issue 1. The ink lines are all color-held on these pages. Color holds are where I paint over the line work so that it becomes a color rather than black. These were the most complicated color holds I had done up till this point in the series. Page 12. the last page of the Illumination. And in terms of page real estate, like I mentioned at the start of the issue, here I'm taking 4 entire pages to tell a folk tale. Why? Because I knew I needed to sell the audience on the Black Axe. That it could be a symbol to unite Midnight's army. That it could exist and have been wielded by a great hero. And with the mention of the mouse shedding his name, it makes it possible that Kellanagh may have been that hero. The layout for this page being 4 sections, with 2 of the diagonals being of visual interest, while the other 2 are text, was just my need to not try and repeat having the same size block of text as the previous 3 pages had. Originally in my outline, these pages were part of a Kellanagh flashback, him explaining to Kenzie and Saxon. But by having it be Midnight's tale, it allowed me to pass the info on to Liam and to the reader, while then using this section as a transition back to Saxon, Kenzie, and Kellanagh. Page 13, and picking up with what is that legend? What is the truth of it? Saxon is questioning how Kellanagh could be the Black Axe. He'd mentioned not believing Kellanagh in the last issue, and I wanted to explore having him mention the reasons to doubt it. Answers not fully explained until the Black Axe series. I also want to bring up guards mice. I remember having a discussion at the time with Nate Pride, a friend and talented illustrator who was helping me then do some editing here at the house, about keeping the language and terms consistent within MouseGuard, and somehow landing on guards mice. I've since changed my mind and want the nomenclature to be guard mice, as I've done in more recent volumes. And I'm torn on copy editing fall the next time it goes back for a reprint. Here we also see fall leaves. I decided somewhere in the middle of this series that the overarching theme should be fall, both because of the time of year being autumn, but also the fall of the guard. This was my first chance to add that autumn palette to the fallen leaves. I was working on this batch of Saxon, Kenzie, and Kellanagh pages in a hotel room in 2006 after my first Baltimore Comic-Con, while sharing a room with Archaea founder Mark Smiley, and waiting to do a signing for the Diamond Retailer Summit. The last panel on this page is also to establish something I'd thought of when conceiving of Kellanagh's character, that he's just as capable at an advanced age as many guard mice are in their prime, which is meant to make you wonder, what was he like when he was in his prime? Page 14, panel 1. Here Saxon makes a rude but valid point, something I knew had to be answered for readers. And at the time, I didn't have an answer for it. So Kellanagh's vague answer was something that covered the topic, and was something I could work around when the time came. I figured out his specific involvement by the time I was working on the Winter series, even though it won't be shown until the Weasel War is published. Panel 2. The reaction shots of Kenzie and Saxon were meant to be poignant, but I think just using those punctuation symbols, I either undersold them or I left it totally up to the reader to insert their thoughts onto those symbols. Panel 3. I can't seem to find the original photo to confirm, but I'm pretty sure I used reference here. Not so much in how to draw rocks, but that the photo of some rocks by the bank of the Huron River inspired me to change the visuals from the leafy slopes and tree branches to something different. More of a, ooh, it'd be fun to draw some rocks. Panel 4. Higher ground? Despite the similarity of tactical elevation ideas Kellanagh may have with prequel Obi-Wan, I think more is the point that up on the rocks, they're on solid ground. No muck and mud to contend with. Surely a faster and more promising route. As for Kenzie helping Saxon, I liked having a moment that showed Saxon's fallibility. He can't always back up his bravado, while also getting a moment to show Kenzie's compassion and wisdom in using his cloak as a rope. Page 15. This page is a mirror of the previous page's layout. Panel 1. Our heroes not having any weapons is a problem I'd not thought to answer until I realized when outlining this issue. They're marching towards a potential war kickoff, unarmed. The dialogue of Kenzie's was a way to help establish things about his character. 1, he understands Saxon and doesn't mind ribbing him a bit. And 2, he's already calm and has a plan. On the rest of the page, we find that Kenzie's plan isn't just an inspiration of thought, but a preparedness, a long game, slow and methodical idea-based strategy. The landmark, shown in panel 5 and lost in the overly hatched, color-held, and rain-washed artwork, is a tree that is the first to turn color in the fall. This was based on a tree at the end of our street when I was growing up that was always the first to turn colors. An enormous maple that turned a brilliant red in a matter of days and pretty accurately told us when the turning of colors would start for the rest of the neighborhood. I remembered that and thought that it would make an excellent identifying landmark location. Page 16, panels 1 and 2. I struggled with how to show the motion of Kenzie digging in the leaves and loamy soil for his stash. Up until this point, any position I was drawing the mice in, other than traditional front profile or three-quarter standing poses, was stuff I was having to learn on the job in that panel. I thought of the pose of Yoda when he's digging through Luke's things on his knees looking for food. Kenzie only finds 2 swords to show that this hiding space could have been accessed by others in the past, but mostly because I never wanted Kenzie to have a sword. Panel 3. Saxon complaining about the condition of his tree stash blade is funny to me because 1. Beggars can't be choosers. 2. Saxon likes to complain. And 3. Perhaps this is only my own author headcanon, but Saxon is notorious for not taking proper care of his swords. Something that I tried to hint at in Winter when Saxon gets a very special sword. Panel 4. Kenzie only needs a sword long enough to fashion himself a new staff. This one, apparently maple. I love the idea that Kenzie can always get himself a new staff at any time and on any stage of his patrols. Panel 5. The last panel on this page is a big upshot. Why? I'm not completely sure, but I'm pretty sure it was to partly change up the camera angles for variety's sake, partly to show scale, but also to have more sky showing. The idea that the next transition to another place would feel more cinematic. Page 17, panel 1. We transition to a lookout mouse at Lockhaven. While his name isn't mentioned until the next page, this is Quigley. He started as an RPG mouse guard character long before there was a mouse guard RPG. In fact, before there was a mouse guard. My friend and real-life inspiration for Kenzie, Jesse Glenn, made a guard mouse named Quigley Willowroot for a homebrew system I tried a bit to explore mouse guard as a concept, long before I started working on the comics. Lockhaven is not mentioned in a caption to show where we are now. I hoped the reader would understand, but more on that in a few panels. Panel 2. Here the reader is meant to be asking, who is that mouse? I set it up so it could be midnight approaching Lockhaven. After all, in the last scene, Kenzie did just mention he's worried about Lockhaven keeping itself sealed. Is this the villain approaching alone, like Midnight said he would? Panel 3. Rand's office or security nook is under an arched staircase in a real castle, Crac de Chevalier, in Syria. The castle I used as reference for the floor plan or map in the early issues. I just filled in an empty space from a reference photo and filled it with a desk, cabinets, a rondel glass window, maps, and lanterns. Rand is one of the first 3 mice I ever drew for Mouse Guard, or as it was called then, 1149. Deciding not to include him as a main character in issue 1 was hard, as he's meant to be part of the balance of that trio. But I used Liam instead, because as an inexperienced character, Liam could ask the questions on behalf of the reader. This gave me an opportunity to give some implied backstory to Rand, but also to promote him and to give him an important role at Lockhaven. Quigley's dialogue trickling down the stairs explains to the reader that we are in Lockhaven. It also lets readers know Rand's name is Rand, which, not mentioned here, happens to mean shield bearer. Page 18, panels 1 and 2. Rand asks for the mouse's cloak color, which shows how important an identifying feature it is for guard mice. But as Quigley points out, the cloak color here isn't of any help because of the muck and the mud. This is me trying to further the suspense of who that mouse is approaching the gates. Part of Rand's duty not yet explained, as a protector of all guard mice, is to plot the various patrols' progress. He's estimating based on average travel times and advancing the pawns along the map. I made a pawn for reference by adding modeling clay atop a chess piece. We included a new sculpt of these in the original first edition Mouse Guard role-playing game, but as they were expensive to produce, didn't quite live up to our expectations in terms of color and weathering, and they served no gaming rule purpose. We nixed them for the second edition. Panel 4. In this last panel on the page, I wanted the audience here to be worried. Is Rand making a huge mistake? Page 19, Panel 1. For this ratcheting pulley system for the portcullis, I referenced a photo of an existing gate wheel. However, I can't figure out where the image reference came from. For one mouse to operate this alone, though, must mean there's some heavy-duty pulleys or gear ratios going on up top for him to raise that iron portcullis. Panel 2. This extra beat with the portcullis now up and the doors open build anticipation, but it also establishes the visual of the gates up close from the exterior, something that ended up becoming very important for the next issue. Panel 3. Another beat with the approaching mouse all in silhouette to keep the reader still questioning, who is that mouse? And then in panel 4, we get the reveal. It's Sadie. Page 20, panel 1. Well, hopefully readers remember Sadie from back in issue 2, but in case not, I have Rand here use her name to re-establish in case her fur cloak color combination was forgotten. One way to cut off dialogue is for the interrupted party to have a long dash at the end of what they're saying, perhaps mid-word, like Rand here trying to say Caligaro. And in panel 2, another way is to have a balloon block the other and cut the dialogue visually. As a detail note, I don't know if I did this on purpose, but Rand is holding a charcoal-colored pawn as Sadie's info is revealed. An allusion to midnight, or just a casual coloring coincidence? I honestly can't remember, but I'll take the credit for being subtle with a clue. Panel 3. This information is not taken lightly. Without counsel, Rand bars the gates and seals off Lockhaven. I went with the tall panel shape here because I thought showing Rand large as he makes this kind of declaration worthy of the space, and it made an impact. He is serious about defending Lockhaven. Page 21 is all about exploring Lockhaven as Rand and Sadie chat and ready Lockhaven's defenses. In panel 1, Aubrey, a mouse I'd created for a friend, made her way into the first sketchbook and is also featured here. She stands on the far right. Rand asks for the other entrances to be sealed, but throughout the series, other than the main gates and the secret one that supposedly only Kellenon knows about, something I will cover in the next issue's commentary, we've only ever seen the stable-type gates with the hares in winter. Panel 2. Sadie is asking this question on my behalf, something I worried about as I was drawing the page, and Rand's answer is the only thing I could logically have him say. There was no way to know if the traitor was already inside. Panel 3. I have no idea how the inside space of Lockhaven goes together. I hope someday to map it all and figure out the bulk of it out. But here I was just piecing together interesting visual reference of castle interiors to stage my scenes of dialogue and story. Most of the stone architecture on this page is various parts of, again, Crac de Chevalier. For the last panel, I added some roof trussing to the existing architecture, which, as roof trussing goes, doesn't make a lot of sense. Something I don't believe I get across in this book, and perhaps not corrected until the role-playing game came out, is that Lockhaven does not really have a citizen population. The Citadel is a place for the guard mice, both the ones who patrol, and the ones who are trade mice who purely perform service to keep the guard running. They are considered part of the guard. Some of those mice, and perhaps even a few of the patrol guards, may have families, but Lockhaven is not a city in that regard. So the mice here that Rand is ordering are all guard mice. Page 22, panel 1. I remember having to come up with this mouse's name as I was lettering the page, and in one of my baby name origin books, I found the name Merit meant gatekeeper. Panel 2. All that rain from this issue served a story purpose. Having the pulley rusted gave me a chance to have Lockhaven vulnerable. When plotting the issue, I worried that once Rand was notified and sealed Lockhaven, it would be nearly impossible for Midnight to enter, other than to use Liam as some sort of key by threatening to behead him. So I went in another way, and got the doors sealed, but not unbreachable. Panel 3. Breaking up the panel layout here with a pull-back and top-down angle helps remind us of how small, this time even in their own castle, these mice are. It's also a way to show several mice working together to block the doors. The balcony or catwalk here was something that I threw in to eat up some visual space, but it proved to be a great set location for a dramatic moment in the next book, Winter. I didn't have any specific reference for this room as I was drawing it. I made it up looking at the types of pillars or buttresses I had already drawn and placing Rand's office where I had already established it a few pages ago. It meant that I was building Lockhaven as I drew each panel. Panel 4. I referenced a real set of wooden stairs, but again, I can't seem to find any clues about from where I got the photo or where the real location is. But I like that Lockhaven has both stone and wooden bits. Some of that shows age, and that it's been added on to, amended, repaired, and perhaps not finished in the long existence of this place being a safe haven for mice. Page 23, Panel 1. Our first exterior of Lockhaven. The front tower and gate is based on Carisbrooke Castle in Wales. Getting ready to draw Lockhaven from the exterior, I looked at a lot of castle reference, trying to find a facade that I liked. This was one of the ones that I found doing some Google image searching, and I really liked the look of it. And for whatever reason, when I saw it, I thought, that feels like Lockhaven. Panel 2. The original outline says for this part, quote, "Big shot of army at the gates," end quote. I opted instead to show Lockhaven big in the first panel, and then the army small and determined if somewhat soured in the last panel of the issue. This being the setup and culmination, the final battle for the last issue of the first series of Mouseguard. Page 24, or in the back of the book if you have the hardcover, is the first pinup by Jeremy Bastian. Jeremy had started using a brush to ink around this time, I believe, and I remember him being excited about doing a piece for the villain issue of the series. And his version of Midnight's armor is much more interesting than mine. When drawing Midnight for various sketchbooks and posters since, I've tried to incorporate Jeremy's details into my version. Another nice Bastian-esque touch is the monogram M with a stylized Liam trussed up in the heart-shaped knotwork that flows around it. It's beautiful, and I'm pleased to say that I own the original. And that's the 5th issue of Mouseguard. It has been collected in fall 1152, published by Archaea. If you've enjoyed this commentary, please leave comments in the section below. Let me know what I didn't answer for you in this issue, and subscribe for updates when I add more Mouseguard commentary. Thank you for listening.